Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about how people are going a little too far with this data and research on partials in the lengthened position. Now, I've been saying for a long time that one of the keys to muscle growth is, of course, to get into those lengthened positions, right? The bottom of most movements, right, where the muscles are the most stretched. There's a lot to be said for that. Okay, there's a lot to be said for that. But I think part of the problem that people are not thinking about is what they are missing when they're doing just the bottom half of movements. And I think what a lot of the research is problematic on is, number one, research on exercise science is not particularly good. It is not one of the better sciences, and I've done videos explaining why it's problematic, why it's difficult to gather data, why the number of people involved is way too small to always draw the best conclusions. There's problems with the peer review process on it, like they're given a lot of leeway. Okay, and then there's also enormous amounts of bias, and that bias is, again, can be a funding problem. But let's get over and talk about the problems. One of the things to think about is even if you get a set of studies and they're like, oh yeah, well, this particular muscle, right, this particular muscle or this head of a muscle grew just as much, if not more, from doing just the bottom half versus the full range of motion. Here's the issue. There is really no such thing as an isolation exercise, right? Hopefully everybody understands that, right? If you don't understand that, we've got a problem. In other words, you can't isolate a muscle. A barbell curl or even a concentration curl with a dumbbell does not isolate the bicep. All right, let's get that out of the way. When you start looking at some of these even smaller upper body movements, what you have to understand is that certain parts of the range of motion have an enormous bias towards certain heads or towards other muscles. So if you're only measuring one muscle, all right, see where we're going? You're only measuring one muscle, not all the muscles involved. It's definitely going to skew the data. Example, curls. All right, look at the anatomy of a curl. Yeah, we could talk about the shoulder involvement for like the short head and everything. Okay, we could talk about all that, but let's just talk about the bicep and the accompanying muscles. All right, bicep has obviously a little more of the bias load at the bottom half of the movement. Okay, when we're talking just the elbow joint. But what gets recruited very heavily on the top half? The brachialis. Okay, see where we're going with this? So if you skip the bottom of a curl, when you see all these guys doing it, you see tons of guys doing it, even on these preacher curls and all this other stuff, you are limiting bicep development. But if you skip the top, you're limiting brachialis. And you guys always notice, you see historically, you'll see a lot of these bodybuilders. You have these concentration curls where I really squeeze and focus the top, builds my bicep peak. It's because it's building the brachialis. All right, what does the brachialis do when you flex your bicep? It rolls up under the bicep. Now, peaks are largely genetic, and you can't reshape muscles, but you can build other muscles. See where we're going? And those other muscles can affect the way that you look. So a bigger brachialis, a much bigger brachialis, is going to do what? It's going to make the bicep peak look a little bit bigger when the arm is flexed. Well, yeah, because it rolls under there and can push the bicep up a little. But let's step back and look at that. So if you only do the bottom half of a curl, you're going to limit your brachialis development to some extent. If you only do the top, you're going to limit your bicep development in favor of some of the other stuff. Okay, overhead pressing, perfect example. People don't seem to realize, they're always like, oh, the overhead press doesn't work the side heads. It works the side head enormously on the bottom half. So, all right, let's think about that for a moment. Think about that for a moment. The people who don't touch their chest on the overhead press are like, oh, it's not the best, it doesn't blow up my side head of my delt. Well, why don't you try going all the way down? All right. Again, look at the physics involved. Just like on a lateral raise, if you just do the bottom half, obviously it's the lateral with a plate or a dumbbell or a cable is a phenomenal side delt builder, right? Well, so is the overhead press. of the bottom part. Once you reach the top half, it becomes extremely anterior dominant. Okay? So do we see where we're going here? These are two heads of the same muscle. Where we are in a range of motion on any of these exercises, because you could apply that to not just an overhead press, but a lateral, upright row, everything else. Different things get worked at different points of the range of motion. Even on a small exercise, let's say you take a lateral raise. If you were to do like a glute raise all the way up, yeah, you're going to get the front delt more involved. The side delt becomes less involved. If you were to do those reverse, whatever they used to be called, like a reverse lateral, people used to do overhead a long time ago, what happens? It's going to work the anterior head of the delt more. And so on and so forth. Do people see where we're going with this? Different muscles and different heads get worked at different points of the range of motion. So on a lot of these exercises, it makes sense to do the full range of motion, especially, oh my God, we start getting into something like a squat, something like a bench press. You guys really think that you need to be skipping the top of these movements? You really think a deadlift, there we go. These lengthened position partials, you are leaving a lot of gains on the table, no matter what the research shows on individual muscles, keeping in mind that data is often questionable. And I'm not saying the lengthened position isn't arguably the best for a given muscle. I would go so far as to say that I bet 80 to 90% of muscle growth from a full range of motion exercise does come from the bottom third. So yeah, you should be getting those stretch positions. They're important, right? We should be going all the way down. But we need to stop this nonsense now that people have of let's skip the lockouts. You're leaving gains on the table. Why? Guys, try to work on training full range of motion. I'm not saying we're always going to have full range of motion on everything, but it's a good idea to work muscles in general through a reasonably long range of motion. You know, granted, it's not always possible on all movements. Things get in the way. I get that. And machines can be the worst on that. Anyone's like, oh, machines are bad. Really, machines almost force you into partials all the time. It's ridiculous. But I digress. Back over to the point. Let's not take this stuff too far to the point to where it becomes a crazy fad where we throw away logic and reason. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.